Greetings from Ukraine. This is Chip Taylor, and I'm a small market gardener here in southwest Ukraine. And what we do, we grow peppers and tomatoes and herbs, different spices for Mexican food. And I'm in one of the greenhouses weeding peppers like I often do, and thought I'd talk to you a little bit about how to take care of these peppers that actually want to be living in southern Mexico or Central America, that kind of stuff. Now I keep this place pretty hot. You can see on the far side, I've started rolling up the sides a little bit because this gets a little too hot in here. I've seen habaneros in the Yucatan that are grown actually under trees in shade, and I've got some pine trees outside that give us pretty good shade in the mid-afternoon to late afternoon. Now the sun's going a little bit lower, and we get a little bit more sunshine in here, and these peppers are getting plenty of sun. But we don't want them to overheat. If they get too hot, they'll start dropping their blossoms. I keep the ground fairly wet. It's not soaking wet. We let it dry out sometimes because peppers are susceptible to root rot, and we don't want to over water these guys. So I let the peppers tell me exactly how much water they need. You can see these guys are looking pretty good. These are some habaneros. They're putting on a lot of blossoms. Not much fruit yet, but it's still pretty early. Now I've got a lot of birds in here, and my son was just in here a few minutes ago, and he was telling the birds to shoo. But I don't mind the birds, and you might be able to see them flying around behind me, because they're in here getting some of the bugs that collect on the top of the greenhouse. I do not mind that at all. They'll be down here on the ground, in between the rows, under the plants, picking out bugs. They're doing me a favor. And so it's, with the sides open and the front and back door open, the birds are coming in here, in and out all day long. And that's me working with nature as opposed to trying to keep the door shut and then killing the bugs and the pests off by either pesticides or coming in here and picking them off by hand, that kind of stuff. The only issue we have really with pests in this situation are slugs. And the slugs are manageable. We put out beer traps. We put out a little bit of wood ash. They don't like to cross the ash. There's a couple other small things that we do. We don't use any kind of chemicals, man-made synthetic chemicals. We just use what we understand will work, especially with the ash, because that's actually putting phosphorus into the soil and it's helping the plants absorb the nutrients. What else did I want to say? With the use of this greenhouse, we've had tomatoes in here. We've had a lot of salad greens. I've still got some cilantro, and there's a little bit of basil growing, that kind of stuff. But what I wanted to show you, among these weeds, I've got some volunteer tomatoes. And these are from tomatoes where the fruit dropped last year and either got stepped on or something else happened where the tomato actually fell to the ground and stayed there. And so now it's June 16th, and so these guys, that's probably a 3-month-old plant, and so this guy is starting to put out blossoms. I've got several of them in here. This is probably maybe a dozen volunteer tomatoes. What I have found in my experience is that the tomatoes that are volunteers, the ones that the seed drops on the ground by itself, germinates, produces a plant, and the plant's actually healthy enough to get some size to it, those tend to be pretty healthy plants. Those are usually disease resistant, and they're healthier, so they're resistant to pests also. Um, it's like um, it's like with people, and you know, I hate to use this example, but with this pandemic, there's a lot of people who are susceptible, are more inclined to develop disease because they've gotten their immunity lowered, or there's something going on, some pre-existing condition that's caused them to be vulnerable. Same way with plants. You know, if you've got a nice healthy plant, I was noticing that these habaneros, the leaves are nice and shiny, and that's actually a plant-like fat that's builds up on the outside of the plants. That just tells me the plant is fat and healthy. And these guys are less susceptible to slugs, to other pests. They're far more aggressive as far as dealing with the whatever weeds might be around them. And so there's a stronger plant, less susceptible to problems, just like with people. And so the healthier your plants are, obviously the more fruit you're going to have, but the less problems you're going to have with pests. And so we started these guys off. These plants were probably started in December. And so they've got a few months on them. You know, we're looking at 6 months now. Now, they stayed inside, they stayed under lights, they stayed in containers, and so they did not just explode. If this was a 6-month-old plant that had been planted in the soil in a nice warm environment, these plants would probably be 2 or 3 times the height that they are now. This is southwest Ukraine. We were still getting pretty cold just a few weeks ago. Yesterday was cold and cloudy, and so one of the reasons why it works here in these greenhouses is that I can get it pretty toasty in here when I need to. The problem that I have, the biggest issue I have with growing vegetables not from this part of the world, is that the amount of sunlight is just greatly diminished by cloud cover. You know, the clouds cover up the sun in Ukraine right around September, mid-September. It doesn't come back until, what, April? And so we spend a lot of time with cloud cover. The temperature's not so toasty, but it's the lack of sunlight. And so these guys will get a little bit of height to them. They won't do the same as they would in the Yucatan. That's fine. I'll get a diminished production, but I'll get production. And so we just kind of deal with what conditions are here. We make our plants as healthy as they can. The soil's very rich. I've taken care of the soil for the last 5 years. I've put a lot of work into it. It was pretty good to start off with, but we have spent a lot of time putting organic matter into the soil, increasing the microbial life in it. It's a lot of worms, a lot of microbes, a lot of fungus, and a lot of bacteria in the soil, healthy types. That's what we have to have in order to help the plant withstand the pests that are going to be encountered, whether that be disease or actual bugs running around that want to munch on our leaves. A healthier plant is going to be more prone to fight off any kind of issues that they might run into in this environment. I've got a couple of other plants in here that I put in order to keep down pests. The cilantro keeps off pests. I've got some nettles, some stinging nettles on the outside. I've got some yellow mustard growing. I've got some basil growing. There's some dill in here. These are all herbs that we will use, but that also, even the nettles, we'll use that. But not only will we use them, these type plants are prone to keep pests away. And so it's one of the ways that we can actually use one plant to help us grow another plant. The corn was another one. I didn't realize this until a couple of years ago, Aphids like peppers. Aphids like tomatoes, but they like the corn more. And so if I've got corn growing in here, the corn's a little bit stronger and a little bit more able to withstand aphids. But if I've got corn in here with my tomatoes and my peppers, the aphids go to the corn. They don't come to the peppers. And the problem with the aphids mostly, you know, inside they're a big hassle. But out here, the biggest problem is the way that they affect the blooms, and while the fruits hasn't even started to develop yet. And so we deal with that in a natural way. We try to keep these herbs growing all around this. They're interplanted among these rows, and they do an excellent job of keeping down the number of pests that come in. We've got some ladybugs that come in. It's not something that I think is overly abundant here. We could encourage it, but in this part of the world, we get these Asian beetles, which are a type of ladybug, and they're in here. They're in here now, but not in the numbers that I think really make that much significant difference. And that by itself is not enough. So we put in these other herbs that are put out, whether it's just a smell that the pests don't like, or whether it's something that attracts the pests to this other plant as opposed to the plants that we're trying to grow. And it's a combination of all these things. There's a few things like that we do in order to encourage the predatory wasp to come in. I don't get rid of any of the wasps. There's nests around the pig houses, which are right behind us. And so when I see a wasp nest, I leave it alone. I tell my son that they're over here, but I don't kill them, because I've seen them in here eating small caterpillars off of my plants. And so we use that. There's a small finch right in front of me here, maybe 12 feet away, and it's picking through the grass looking for bugs. Fine with me. I do not mind that at all. So there's a few things like that, the way that we work in cooperation with our environment. We've got our first frost will be about the 21st or 22nd of September. Last frost was the end of April, April 21st, 22nd, something like that. We can get a frost as late as mid-May. We can probably get them in June. We just haven't had one since I've been on this farm. But we had a killing frost May 15th, 2017, and just did a lot of damage to my tomatoes. That's before we had the greenhouses. And so I know what our conditions are here as far as the weather. I know that when the sunlight's going to stop. And so when we look at what we can grow and what our seasons are, we understand that the temperature won't hurt us in mid-September, but the lack of sunlight will. So we really had to have things started well early in the grow rooms inside the main building here. And then we bring them out here as soon as we can. Mid-May was as soon as that I felt the soil temperature was warm enough to put peppers in here. That it won't kill them to be colder than 50 degrees, but they just don't do anything. It kind of stunts them. And so mid-May, third week in May, that kind of stuff, we started putting in peppers. I've got one more batch of peppers, about 1,000 plants, and I'm going to put them in the day after tomorrow in our last greenhouse. It's about 600 square feet, maybe a little bit bigger than that, maybe about 900 square feet. And so we're going to put in 1,000 plants in there, pack them in. They're these hatch peppers. They've got 85 days to maturity, so that'll be tight. It'll be right at the end of our window. But we looked at what space we had available, to germinate plants indoors. That was the best we can do. We came out here with about 1,000 plants, a little bit more than 1,000. I think it's like 1,200 plants in here, and we put them out as soon as we could. And then we started a second wave of peppers and tomatoes And the tomatoes are in the ground. They were in about 2 weeks ago. And then this last wave of hatch peppers will go in, like I said, I think the 17th or 18th. And not tomorrow, the day after tomorrow. And that's according to the moon phase going by the Farmer's Almanac. So we'll transplant that stuff and cross our fingers and hope that we get enough sunlight in the month of September to help our plants come along. One of the other things with hatch peppers that I love, they're not supposed to all turn red. If I have a green hatch pepper, that's what it's supposed to be. So I don't have to worry about the pepper coming to full maturity as a big, bright red green pepper. Not like a habanero. I need something that's going to, at least give me 85 days, 90 days, something like that. 90 days will be, it's almost 100 days before our first hard frost. And then we don't get a hard freeze until it's like October 27th last year and the year before last, when all the tomatoes froze inside these greenhouses. I'm going to harvest before that. But that gives me about 120 days. This is June 17th, let's say. July, August, September, October. That's 4 months. That's 120 days. I can deal with that. Those hatch peppers will be fine at 100 days. And according to the characteristics of that pepper, they only need 85. And so I should be fine. They should be right at the end of their growing season when everything just kind of starts to slow down. Anyway, I thought that might be something interesting for you. If this is something some kind of content that you think is interesting, that you can learn something from it, feel free to subscribe, hit like, share this with your friends, post it on your own page. And if you have any comments or questions, feel free. And I hope you have a blessed day.